I keep coming back to a memory that I think I made up and couldn't really tell when, as if one day, simply daydreaming, I had suddenly imagined it. It felt like one of those imaginary dialogues you have after a moment that shook you. Simply rewriting the dialogue to correct the inaccurate depiction of yourself that transpired from it. Giving yourself a little bit of justice. So, I'm a little boy and I'm lying on a bench. I'm not sure if I'm inside or outside, maybe some combination of the two. I think there's a plane. I can guess there's one high in the sky, but I can't actually see it. There's a thick, warm rain falling on a nearby roof of some shack. In the next room, a dance class, my mother is in there, and I can hear the flamenco teacher counting the steps she's showing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm counting the steps too. And on the nearby roof, among the unstructured sound of clingy raindrops, a few tinkles stand apart, and the rain is counting the steps too. The more I think about the memory, the more unsure I am of whether or not it happened. As I leave it again in my mind, it gains intensity, a reassuring quality, as if there's some inner hidden meaning to it, some truth I locked inside. A beacon for misty waters, hidden inside a reconstructed memory. The simple ID with deep roots of the many hours spent waiting, learning to listen and pay attention. Mementos of how much can grow in the gaps, where the present can cure the past. I used to go to my grandparents once a week. They had a tiny place near the river, and there was this super ugly parking lot just in front, which I loved because I could skate on it. Across the ugly parking lot, a giant park. A beautiful park with lots of small paths, a cute lake that smelled like mud. We would go to the center of the park, where there was a museum, and in front of it, a playground. It was the whole purpose of the walk. A small ice cream truck was always there, and I could obviously get an ice cream after playing. One day we're there, just arriving in the playground. There's a lot of kids. I can see the slide that I always play on, and my friend Charlotte was standing on it. I don't see her very often because we don't go to the same school. I think it's amazing that Charlotte is there, that I can play with her. And I let go of my grandmother's hands to start running toward the slide. I had never done it before. I was very well behaved. My grandmother calls me, but I keep on running faster and faster. But the girl suddenly turns around, and it's not Charlotte. She had the same hair, the same kind of clothes, but it's not her. I suddenly break down because I realize how much I miss her. And because today is still not the day we're gonna play together. I'm angry at the girl because she should be Charlotte, and she's not. I came back to my grandmother's in tears. She asked me if I want to play, but I just want to go home. I don't want an ice cream either because the day is ruined. Because Charlotte should have been there and she isn't. I discovered what it was to truly miss someone. Now she's gone for good. But the feeling of mistaking someone for her is all that remains. To be but a few meters away, overflowed by bliss. And I can only wish for someone to have the same hair, the same kind of clothes, and to fool my mind for a second before I realize it cannot possibly be her. But there's always this possibility of a single second when everything seems about to happen that makes me grateful of those women, young women, that still look like her, like she did. As our ages grow apart, that offers me a magnificent second of believing that I'll be able to look into her eyes again. I always wished he was my dad, ever since I was a kid. I never admitted it, not even to myself until many years after his death. It was not a thing I was telling myself or anything, but the memory of spending time with him has this unmistakable feeling to it. Looking back, I'm certain that I was always desperately yearning for his presence and his attention. Even now, I can easily assemble the pieces of his presence. A gentle and faint smell of smoke, his slightly shining brown skin, his gigantic smile and deep voice. His presence was so rich. Thinking about it still relaxes me. When he died, there was a large funeral, and I guess I was expecting it to be a moment when I would feel all my senses of his presence one last time. But when I arrived at the ceremony, I suddenly felt like a stranger. I was still a kid, and I guess I didn't realize that he was a whole person and not just my perception of him. His family was there, and I barely knew a couple of them. Most of them were speaking in a language that I wasn't completely familiar with. As he was a photographer, a few people were discussing his work. They seemed to know him much, much better than I did. They were talking about things he had done that I didn't know about. Later, a man came to play a very specific type of tango from the region he was born in. Everything was completely unfamiliar. At this moment, I felt like he had suddenly abandoned me, suffering from my own childish realization that my presence in his life was nothing, while his presence in mine was of such extraordinary richness. I was such a tiny, ridiculously neglectable part of his own existence. And while I was secretly losing a father, no one could really understand my grief. Over the years, that feeling slowly faded away, but the feeling of his presence remained. And I guess that if I realized that day that maybe I wasn't such a big part of his life, He certainly was of mine, and his remembered presence is mine to keep and carry.